Welcome to another episode of the Unblocking podcast. Today we have Logan. And Logan, I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about what you're feeling stuck on.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Logan. I'm from Southern California originally, living in Central Coast California now. I'm studying. My background is very varied. I was at different times. I've been a soldier. I've been a linguist. I've been a missionary. I've been what else? I've been kind of the technical person in non-technical groups, and the non-technical person in technical groups. And so I kind of have my background is like spans a lot of different places in a lot of different ways. We can get into that to the point that it's relevant. But currently, I'm studying a Master's of Public Administration program at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in Monterey, and it's kind of fun because it's a lot of like how systems work traditionally and how they're set up to be, but also a lot of how they could work in different ways and a lot of cutting edge kind of research into different ways of getting the right people together at the right times to do the right things in the world. And so that's kind of become a personal interest of mine, and I've been exploring it in my curriculum, but I'm also exploring it outside and kind of being able to find the balance of like how I work within a system to how I go outside a system, or how I kind of go from being abstract to being very concrete is kind of where kind of getting that balance right is not something that I've kind of really gotten right at this point. And I end up overthinking and overanalyzing and over planning and kind of doing a lot of stuff where I'm kind of not actually connected with doing something
Hmm.
concrete in the world that is able to
Sure.
at some point like generate value but also generate income. So trying to navigate that is where I'm at.
Okay. So I'm going to ask a lot of questions, and they'll be kind of scattershot, and
Of course.
they're not really intended to be leading questions in any way. I'm just trying to get a lot of data points so that I can develop a model. One question is sort of like, and also you can feel free to just be like, I don't know, I can't answer that question, or like,
No, it's
I'd like to answer that question a different way, or something like that. But how much runway do you
I
financial
have.
runway?
Yeah, I can vary it depending on how like I can stretch it out a
Sure.
little bit longer, but really like probably right now under the most normal conditions, I have like one more semester that's paid by the GI Bill, so I have
Hmm.
like basically like 5 or 6 months, and then I could take another semester if I really wanted to. Like I don't need to for my degree, but if I wanted more runway, I could get another kind of 4 or 5 months, and then I have probably 3 months of savings, so somewhere around like 6 months to a year.
Do you have any capital, like own a house or anything like that?
I don't own a house, but I have enough in the S&P 500 to cover my student loans and whatever goes above it. And so I kind of like periodically I'll like
So
take
like
whatever it is, but I'll
no,
pull some alpha out and kind
yeah,
of use that to
no
fund
capital,
something.
no debts either,
Yeah. So
something like that ish.
yeah,
And then so, but finance is still stressful in the sense that it's like obviously you still have to pay rent. Also, presumably
yeah,
you want to build
hmm
wealth.
yeah. So
Do
kind of
you
right
have
now,
goals
I'm very much
other than building wealth? Building wealth is a good goal, but are there
building
other things
wealth.
that that's blocked on?
Yeah, I mean, I really less. I'm financially motivated to the extent where I want to be able to be kind of autonomous with my time and do what I think is most meaningful. And so that's kind of the goal, is to be able to do that. But and then ideally, like what would happen ideally is I can find a job that is doing like making me money, but is also doing good in the world, kind of contributing to any number of kind of very like wicked and complex problems that we're kind of having problems addressing as a society. But a lot
Sure.
of the time, what needs to happen to address those problems isn't necessarily what people think is meaningful or is valuable. And so you get a lot of funding places that have low impact and very little funding to the places that can have high impact. And so kind of trying to make the case that kind of there's to put some money towards something that doesn't seem like it would be useful, but that actually is a very important thing, is kind of a dilemma I deal with in terms of
Yeah.
finding funding.
I noticed some assumptions there
Yes,
that are
yeah, of
not
course.
true, necessarily. So
Yeah.
you said, like, for instance, areas with low impact get high funding and areas with high impact get low funding. But of course, the world couldn't be shaped that way, because once an area with high impact is discovered and well known by funders, of course, you can leverage the high impact for more value
Yeah,
creation,
yeah,
which of course could make you more money. So it must also be true that areas with high impact will also have high funding, and also areas with
yeah,
low
yeah,
impact will also have low funding. So, I
yeah.
just want to point
With
it out
perfect
that like
knowledge, I think
all
that's
of these,
definitely true.
but it's not just with perfect knowledge. Like in the world that
Yeah,
we have, like of course, plenty of areas with high impact have high funding. Like for instance, AI development has high
yeah,
funding
yeah,
and high impact.
Yeah, and that's an
Military
interesting
defense has
point
high
actually.
funding and high impact, for instance.
Yeah,
Um,
because what the way that I'm trying to think through this is like AI funding for AI is enormous, and there's also a decent amount of funding for AI alignment. But kind of if I put what I'm trying to work on in a phrase, it's human alignment and how you get humans aligned in a way that's proper, where you don't, where you kind of you avoid kind of the bad end states there. And so kind of
yeah.
thinking through that, I kind of think, hey, like there should be an analogous amount of money put into human alignment, and we are putting it there. Like governments, there's a lot of organizations and institutions that are kind of doing that in some way. But I'm kind of like I was trying to rather than looking at what the next incremental step things is um,
Hmm.
what the next incremental step is, my general approach is saying like, hey, like how would we build something from scratch with everything that we have now? How is that different than what we have, and how can those differences inform what changes are or are not useful for kind of improving the direction of society? And so that's kind of the general area where I would like to see funding, and there are places that are doing grants for that, and I haven't applied for them mostly because I haven't been able to put it into like a pitch that's succinct enough to fit within the forms that they have for
Yeah.
kind of considering things. But
So
I'm getting
let
closer and
me just
closer with
offer
getting
you a
there.
frame first, and then I have more questions, and we'll
Yeah,
keep going
yeah,
on there. But I think a frame that might be helpful to you is to identify as like that, to identify this desire as a desire for entrepreneurship. So you have an
yeah,
entrepreneurial
yeah, yeah,
desire, right? And it's like, well, what is the job of the entrepreneur? The job of the entrepreneur is to notice areas that are underfunded, literally undercapitalized, and then to capitalize on those opportunities. There are cultural entrepreneurs, there are social entrepreneurs who are noticing areas of social capital that are under socially capitalized. You know, there are people whose job it is to do entrepreneurship in just the nonprofit sector and to make sure that grant funding goes to the right places. For instance, GiveWell is like a really
yeah.
huge
Hmm.
example of like a really big nonprofit entrepreneurship project. Um, and it sounds like one thing that you think would unblock you is the opportunity to be able to do entrepreneurship on
Yeah,
this
yeah,
on some area that you deeply care about.
yeah. So what I really like is, I guess, I think entrepreneurship is the word, where like I'm within a broader organization that has their goal and what they're doing, and that they're kind of some entrepreneur has come around and started that. But eventually, as it grows, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's still doing the thing that it was intended to do. But there's a lot of different interacting effects, and there's a lot of ways that it can kind of draw away from what the original purpose was. But if you
Hmm.
can have someone on the inside that is aware of what it was originally there and what's going on now, you can kind of do a lot of kind of mini bits of entrepreneurship within a bigger structure to kind of to keep it kind of to drive back towards what the original entrepreneur intended. So that's in the places where I've been relatively successful and I've had a lot of impact and I feel been felt very fulfilled. It's where I've had that kind of dynamic where I have a little bubble inside of a bigger structure where I
Can you
can
name
have
some of those
freedom.
roles?
Yeah, so like the biggest one, I was an information analyst for Customs and Border Protection, but I was there deployed. So I was there as a soldier. And we kind of had our own team within their intelligence unit, and we were able to kind of take a lot of processes that existed, and I was able to learn how to kind of not automate. I wasn't like coding really, but I was getting the process. I was using charts and tables, and I started to use Power Query and a lot of other things that I taught myself to make that process faster. And then once that
Hmm.
process was faster, I had a ton of extra time, so I was able to think of a whole revamp of how they do their reporting. And so rather than doing it in like a PowerPoint with flat charts, I was able to build a system of dashboards that conveyed a lot of the same information a lot more quickly and a lot more in real time and a lot more kind of interactively, so people could actually get more kind of use out of that. And that was so successful and people loved it so much that we had a team of senior executive service guys come down from Washington D.C. to like the middle of nowhere, Texas, to hear about what we were doing and look at it, because it was something that was kind of within their role to do on a larger level. And they were able to take what we did and kind of apply it broadly across the rest of the system, kind of basically like kind of almost copying and pasting the approach. And so that's probably
Um,
the best example of that.
how long was the project? Like 6 months, 12 months, 2 years?
I was deployed for 12 months there. And the first 6 months, the 3 months were like getting my bearings. The next 3 months were kind of figuring out what I actually needed to do on the baseline. And then the next 3 months were kind of
Sure.
designing this thing and figuring out how it would be useful. And
Um,
then the final
that
three
sounds
were
pretty
scaling.
similar to consulting, management
Yeah,
consulting,
yeah. Hmm.
honestly. Um, and one way that you could solve both your financial blocks and other blocks at the same time while also doing this particular task of like dropping into a context and trying to understand it and trying to improve it could be in that domain. Have you considered that before?
I have considered it. I've looked at it, a couple people, and I've talked with a lot of people that work there. But I think I could be wrong in this because I could just not understand exactly what they're doing. But I think the way like the business model and the funding model is kind of bad because like the consultants get paid usually hourly or contract wise, and so like basically the more they're doing, the more they get paid. But I think the incentive is actually like you should really be, if you're a really good management consultant, you should be figuring out the minimum that you can do that has the most impact. The incentives are kind of cross purposes there because if you're getting paid by
Okay,
the
so let
hour,
me let me ask you, what do you think you should do?
yeah. So I want to have like ideally, if I were doing a consulting kind of consulting thing,
No,
I
I
would
just mean, what do
have.
you think?
Oh,
Not necessarily ideally. I just mean like literally, what do you think you should do?
yeah. What I think I should do is build relationships with people that do consulting and people that need consulting, and kind of understand that more to the point where I can see what the consultants are doing that is necessary and what isn't, and what is helpful and what is not for the people consuming that, and be able to use that to kind of see whether my idea of what a different business model would be is kind of worthwhile and practical and actually likely to be effective.
There's partially that. I guess I'm just going all the way back to the beginning, which is sort of like,
Hmm.
okay, you're doing school right now, like you're planning on graduating. Like, what what really is the thing that you want to do after graduating? Do you
Yeah,
want
I
to be a
guess.
consultant of some type, basically, but you
Yeah,
just want to
I
run
would
your
like
own
to
consulting
be.
agency?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's what the qualitative difference between a consultant and an advisor is, but kind
Yeah,
of that role of being someone that people go to when they have a problem they can't solve, and I'm there to give advice and to think through it and kind of take a lot of cognitive load off their plate and kind of bring it into mine and figure it out, and then bring them back a couple options that are kind of very useful for kind of approaching the problem that they have. And essentially, that's the role of what like intelligence, like military intelligence or intelligence agencies basically do that, but usually in a defense context. And like the same role could be, I see it as being very useful in the broader society, but there's not a lot of the infrastructure to kind of do that type of kind of intelligence work. That's kind of not, I guess, it's kind of yeah,
yeah.
it has a bad
One
rap.
thing I noticed is that this is at too high of a level of abstraction to be implemented. So like the instruction, be an advisor, is not implementable.
Okay.
Um, do you have an implementable thing that you think you should do? That like realistically, like you say it out loud, and I'm like, yeah, that's something that what you can just do.
Yeah, well, on the opposite side, I could just apply to a management consulting firm and work and do consulting within kind of an existing structure.
That's much
Hmm.
more applicable, yeah. And then there's the road to. My suspicion is that somewhere in here is where you're feeling tension, where it's like you have ideas that are at a level of abstraction that are unimplementable, and then there are these in between steps that are ambiguous.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
because
is that part of what's kind of difficult in general with your projects? Is like you have projects,
yeah,
you're like, oh, if
yeah,
I got to that end state, it would be effective, but
yeah.
you are unable to get
It's
to
the
the end state.
middle. Because
Right.
like being like, and I could probably be a management consultant, but what tends to happen with me when I'm in these organizations is it's like really great for the first year or two, and then I realize a lot of the problems, and there's not really a way for me to kind of channel that angst back into fixing what I see are the problems, and so
Sure.
I end up, but I also don't have enough kind of runway, or I don't have a clear
Right.
enough idea in the middle of like what I would do on my own. So I kind of end up leaving and trying to find something else, and I end up kind of having this trail of places that could have been very great careers if I continued them, but I kind of and I probably don't need to cut them short. Like I could just push through and it would be better, but the sensation of it not being worth it is typically strong enough where it's very, very difficult to kind of stay
Yeah.
and be consistent. And that might
The
be more
thing
of a
that
psychological thing, but
it's not necessarily that you're wrong or right. It's more like what we want to do is we want to try to come to clarity about what is possible. And once we have a good conception of that, it will be a lot easier to be happy with what we're doing, because we'll be like, oh, is that at the edge of what's possible? Is that, or is it beyond what's possible, or is it way too easy? Like, am I being less ambitious than I need to be, and I could actually be accomplishing more? I could be getting closer to my goals.
yeah.
One good analogy here that I like to use with people sometimes is, um, sometimes people will do something like they will look at, and this is an exaggerated example, but it's like they'll look at Lady Gaga and they'll be a critic, right? It'll be like,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like if I was Lady Gaga and I was doing the Super Bowl concert, like I would have done it this
yeah,
way instead, and like I would be so good at that. I would be really really good at that, and maybe even that's a good idea. Like who knows?
yeah.
I
Mhm.
I really don't think it's worthy of just denying our ability to do better than Lady Gaga necessarily. It's just you aren't Lady Gaga, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. You have a totally
And
different perspective, and that's
well, it's not that you have a different perspective. It's actually that you have a different set of affordances. It's like one cannot do better at the Super Bowl than Lady Gaga without being invited to do the Super Bowl. And in order to be invited to do the Super Bowl, you have to become famous. And in order to become
yeah,
famous, you have to do all sorts of things. And those things are contingent and those things shape you. And then you become who you are. And
yeah,
so
hmm,
the the thing with Lady Gaga is that if you wanted to become her, what she did at the beginning when she was becoming famous is she did a bunch of stuff. But like she would do all these parking lot concerts. She'd do concerts everywhere. And she'd do like crazy stunts at these concerts and she'd do crazy costumes. And like the way that Lady Gaga developed fame for herself was both by believing that like no show was really too beneath her, uh, which many people just do not have the patience for. Like, there's no way a lot of the
yeah,
critics would have the
hmm,
patience to do the parking lot concerts, and also by just like being an above, over the top, almost self-deprecating performer in some
yeah,
ways,
yeah,
which I think again a lot of people wouldn't have patience for. So there's some like, oh well, if you wanted to do what Lady Gaga's doing at the Super Bowl, that's actually real. Like, and you can do that. And what you need to be like is like, okay, I guess I need to go start performing concerts in parking lots for the next 10 years. And
well,
then
yeah, but even that might not even be the thing that is necessary for your path to fame, because different
I
people do
think
things
I think
different ways.
you can follow Lady Gaga's path to fame. I think you can follow other people's path to fame. Yeah. My belief is mostly you can. And like once you're on their path, you'll like diverge in interesting ways,
Yeah.
but like
Okay.
you can mostly remix other people's path. The thing that's tricky is people try to remix other people's fame. And it's like, no, you're not allowed to do that. You can't remix the end thing.
Hmm.
So you can't look at McKinsey and be like, oh, I'm going to remix McKinsey. It's sort of like,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
McKinsey is like McKinsey. You have to be like, well, what did McKinsey do at the very, very beginning? Like, how did they get started? And there are books
Yeah.
on this. It's
Hmm.
like, what were the management consulting firms at the very, very beginning? What services did they offer, and how did they build those firms? And can I build the firms the way they did? And then you can kind of remix that bit instead. So remixing the beginning rather than remixing the end is one piece of advice I would give with respect to entrepreneurial goals. Um, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs make this mistake where they try to remix the end state of a successful company rather than remixing the very early stages of a successful company. Like for instance, if you wanted to remix Airbnb, uh, yeah,
Yes.
that's really tricky actually. And a lot of the reasons that Airbnb won are not related to the product. It's not because the product's a good idea necessarily. It's because they're fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I don't know a lot of
and
the details, but they did a lot of really interesting
First of all, they
like
were poor
marketing.
for like seven
Yeah.
years. Second of all, they did like a million different experiments, like so many more than you could possibly imagine. And third of all, people like it's just like overall everything they did was not working for like 7 years until finally something worked. And and I think then again, people just do the survivorship bias thing where they're like, oh, because Airbnb is working, that must mean that what they discovered now, like the version of their product now, is the
Yeah.
successful version.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's not true. Like, there's nothing viral about Airbnb necessarily. It's just Airbnb already has the audience they have. They already have the customers they already have. They already have the capture they already have. They already have the distribution they already have. So they can make a bunch of decisions that are just completely irrelevant to somebody who has zero customers and no market.
So are you kind of saying that like the strategy that these people take at the beginning of like how to kind of try a bunch of different things until one fits is
Mhm.
kind of like a little bit more of the key here of like
What
kind of
I'm
like doing these tiny experiments and kind of trying out a ton of things and being very
Generally, what I'm saying is just for entrepreneurs, a category of mistake is to imagine the end goal. The end goal can be motivating, but realistically, you can't start there. Like the final product isn't the product you sell. The final product is like the product that you build, and you build that and I don't know, this is complicated, but again, it especially has to do with remixing. Like if you're trying to do a remix, if you're sort of like, oh, I want to be like X, but with this subtle remix, that
Yeah,
is
yeah,
a particularly scary place to be, in the sense that you don't know if anyone wants that. You don't even know if anyone wants the main thing. Like for instance, if I just took literally Twitter, like exactly Twitter, and I cloned it, and I was like, I'm gonna sell this product. Do people want the product? It's like not really. They want like some network. And so you're kind of like, okay, well, how do I take a network and then clone the network and then sell the network? And then, you anyway. That's it's not I don't want to go too far into this. My main point is just with respect to one of the places in which you might be feeling blocked. One suspicion I have, which I'm not confident is true, is just you're consistently feeling stuck at the first steps, at the early steps toward
yeah, yeah.
goals that are large. The thing I would encourage you to do is find heroes, find people who have done the stuff that you have wanted to do, or things that rhyme with it in the past, and then look at the first steps they made rather than looking at their end product that they made. How did they start? And you might get a lot of inspiration in those places, looking at how other groups started. What else is relevant here?
I think the other thing that might be helpful is that like because like if I sat down and said I have several ideas, or if I actually went all in on them and focused on them, like I would probably do them pretty well in this approach. But like I have a difficulty with my attention where I'm either focused on a ton of things or like very very focused on one thing, and to be focused
Mm-hmm.
on the one thing that will be successful in 10 years like is kind of hard. At least for me, maybe it's hard for everybody, but it's hard for me to kind of do that at a way where I'm committed to it while I'm still doing something else to pay the bills. And so kind of balancing what I need
Totally.
to do to live with what I want to do long term is another point of tension where kind of some
Yeah.
people are really good at keeping a lot of balls in the air, but I'm very good at focusing on kind of
There's some things I could ask that are kind of helpful here that you may I don't know, maybe you like considered a long time ago but have been discarding or something. But um one is just how it's almost like how capable are you of delivering marketable skills to the market
mhm.
in employment roles? Do you feel like highly capable? Like if I put you in a software engineering role and you studied and you trained or whatever, do you
Yeah,
feel like
yeah,
you'd be
yeah.
like, yeah, I'm just delivering, like I'm going to do great?
Yeah, yeah, it would take me it would take me a little while to learn the skills that I would need,
Yeah,
but if I had a little bit of runway, like 3 to 6 months to kind of
sure.
learn them and get them figured out, then I'm very confident that I could do
My
most
main
anything
point
that
here
could
is
be
just
expected.
like in roles, you tend to overperform, underperform.
Yeah, I tend to overperform, and so
Right.
I will usually be in the top, I don't know, the top 10%, 1 to
Yeah.
10% depending on the skill, and kind of
Yeah.
gravitate to that.
And you like getting good at skills
I do, yes.
and you work hard.
Earlier in my life, I was a lot more 100% hard
Yeah.
work, and like later, I've been more of like, hey, what is actually worth doing, and what deserves
Of
my time
course.
and
Of
effort,
course.
and I'm a little bit more selective. But when I
Yeah.
have something that I settle on, kind of it is. I do work fairly hard with that.
Obviously, there's a lot of different camps, but like one camp to kind of ask is like, I don't know, what if you just tried really hard to make a lot of money? Like money buys you a lot of stuff. It buys you freedom. It buys you
Yeah,
vacation. It buys you rest. It buys you entrepreneurship. It buys you employees. It buys you the ability to raise money. Uh, buys you a house. There's like it's
yeah,
like a lot of
yeah,
things that money can get you,
yeah,
and um, I wonder what if you just made that your goal. You're like, yeah, actually, one thing that will help all the rest of my goals on my path. I know. Some people make this mistake. Some people think, oh, once I have a plenty of money, then I'm going to accomplish my goals, and they get in the wrong order.
yeah. You want to
Do you
align it.
feel
You
like
want to
you are
make money
overcorrecting,
doing your goals.
perhaps?
I think so. What you're talking about, um, because I have there's yeah one project idea in particular that I think would be really cool that I would actually need to test. But like I haven't tested it as much because I like to build it. I don't have I know enough about computer science to know how to write a good document that someone can take and write, but not to write it myself. But kind of
Hmm.
what you're kind of like to follow the path of building something good, building something successful, building it to kind of a point where it's kind of recognized and it's self-sustaining, and there's either an acquisition or an IPO or kind of there's some event, like liquidity event, where I kind of can really decide, hey, like this got me to a place where I'm good, and now I can have a little bit of
Oh, I was
stability and
thinking
kind
the
of follow.
opposite. I
Okay.
think if you
Okay.
want to build a successful company, I think that tends to take about 7 years for most people.
Hmm.
So I don't think you should like. I was thinking more like get a really good job that pays you super
Okay.
well, you know, and then use that money to go get your 7 years or whatever, or your
Hmm.
3 years. Like what I tend to tell entrepreneurs, which is not a hard and fast rule, but it's like if you're breaking from this, it's pretty tricky in a lot of cases for a lot of people psychologically, and you end up in some sort of weird loop. In a lot of cases, is like if you don't know how to make money, in other words, like selling your thing, selling your product. So you want to be an entrepreneur, right? So you want to be independent. Let's say you want to be independent. If you want to be independent and you don't know how to make money, maybe selling your services or whatever, I realistically think at that point where you don't yet know how to make money and you haven't yet made money independently, you should give yourself at least 2 years. And so for that reason, I recommend with buffer like 3 years. You should have 3 years of runway. If you have 3 years of runway, then you have a lot of time to try to sell your services for 6 months and fail, and then sell your services for 6 months and then fail, and then take a break and then burn out and then try again. And then, it's like, and make friends and go to the right places and go to the right parties and like fly around. There's a lot of experiments that the average person needs to make. If you're exceptional or you've sold a lot of things before, or you have a kind of sales instinct, then you can obviously shortcut some of these timelines. But selling services is really hard. Selling products is even harder than selling services. And so, if you want to uh, like successfully run a business by selling services or selling products, then I would give yourself at least 2 years. And I feel like if you don't have 2 years, I would I would just personally have the mental model that's sort of like, oh, I actually just don't have enough time to do that. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's almost like imagine if you went to somebody and you're like, hey, I would really like a bachelor's degree, but I want it to be 3 months. Like I only have 3 months of runway, and then they kind
Yeah.
of just be
Yeah. That
like,
does it
okay,
really.
that's just not what that is. That it's a different category. Like you could maybe do your bachelor's degree in 2.5 years if you're really fast, or maybe 2 years if you're like really really fast. Like, are you really really fast? And then you can kind of be like, well, yes, actually, like I'm one of the best. And then they're like, okay, it's still going to take 2 years, and you're like, oh, but you can't make it 3 months. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
no,
It's not
you
possible.
can't make it. You can't make it 3 months. So my general recommendation is to people who are starting their own businesses, just like don't do it if you're low on time like that, or if you're crunched for time. Obviously, that sucks in some ways if you want to be independent, and also, uh, we could go down the unblocking route of like, okay, we want to be independent anyway. Like, literally, how do we unblock you to sell services? What services do you want to sell? Who would be your target customer? Which I think is maybe the next step. Like, it sounds like we should go down that route a little bit. Maybe you have some idea that, hey, there are people who want these consulting services or advisory services that you want, and they should be able to pay you some amount. Let's say you were selling, you were selling a package, and the package had to cost $10,000, and you would advise somebody on a really tough problem that they have for 2 weeks, plus another 2 weeks of like continuing work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, or like let's change those package details a little bit. Like maybe it's 25,000 or whatever. But like roughly, you can't charge any less than that. I mean, that's already selling your time for very cheap. Uh, and who would you go after? Like, who are the people that you could sell that to right now in your contact book?
Like individual people,
I mean, it would have to be
or
somebody that you know. It's probably not going to be somebody that you like find via an ad.
yeah, because I would go like my school has a pretty good alumni network, and I would go through that alumni network to find people at organizations that sort of fit the profile of a buyer of those services, and then chat with them about whether they're having the same problems that I think, and if they are, kind of try to find via them who are inside the right person to talk to the organization to kind of
Have you tried
pitch
this
that
before
service to.
yet?
I have not.
Mm. It's tough because the sorts of services, like, do you feel like you have a pitch for services that are worth that much? Like, would you, okay, so like let's say you're running an org. What sort of org are you running where somebody comes to you and is like, pay me $25,000, I will consult with you and like make your org a lot better? When do you say yes to that?
Well, when do I being the person that's buying the service?
Yeah, yeah, the person that's buying the
Yeah,
service.
yeah. When it's necessary to do, and doing it myself would cost, or doing it within the organization would cost more money than what that service is offered at.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so a lot of it is the things that people don't tend to consider, that people don't think are very important, but actually are very important in the long run. And so bridging that gap with a sales pitch is what kind of where the value comes in, is to be able to show, like, hey, you might not pay attention to a ton of this now, you might not have someone for it, but if you pay attention to it, it could make you, or it could provide this amount of value, and if you don't, it could cost you this amount. And like, instead of figuring it out and kind of try to do a reorganization to address it, like, we can be your people for that, is kind of probably the architecture of what that pitch is.
Yeah. One other question I have for you that's like kind of just more emotional. I have to go in just a second. It's just like, would it be more fun to do this over and over and over again with new teams and have to build new relationships and have to build new management styles and have to like have new teams over and over? Some people, I genuinely like that. It's like, oh, I want to be dropped into a million different circumstances,
Yeah,
learn the
yeah.
people on the ground. Or would you prefer just like having a team that you trust, like friends that you work with every week, every day, every month for years and years, and you build up like really intense relationships of
Mhm.
camaraderie where you work on the same problems and you're still doing the same work. Like you're still advising and doing strategy and doing operations work and making sure that the organism is unblocked, but it's just always with the same people and you build up a rapport over many, many years. Which one sounds better to you?
um I mean, I think my stated preference would be the latter, of having those types of relationships, but my revealed preference throughout my life is definitely the former, where I've kind of just been
Mm,
dropped in places and made friends with people that I was there, and kind of got whatever was done, and that's the way most of my experience has played out.
yeah. And is that because you like that's the way most of your experience has played out because you wanted it to happen that way,
No,
or
no, mostly because it's been the structure. Because like almost everything that I've done has been temporary in some
yeah,
form. It's been like 2 to 3 years at a time of something that I'm doing. But now that I'm older, now that I want to get settled down, kind of moving
yeah,
towards having that tribe, I guess you could call it, is
right,
kind of a bigger priority. I'm feeling the lack of it.
yeah. I think it's possible to find um, folks like that. Okay, then I wanted to quickly touch on. Wait, this is like this conversation could go on for hours and hours. There's a lot to discuss here, and sorry I spent so much time on career stuff.
Oh no, it's
I
okay.
want to discuss it briefly a little bit about the psychological blocks that you said you were experiencing, like especially focusing on too many things at once versus focusing on one thing. Where do you personally feel like that's coming from?
Um, I feel like it partly comes from that I'm just interested in a lot of things. My interest draws me there, but it also comes from probably a lack of confidence in the thing that I'm focusing on now is the right thing to be working
Mm,
on. And so
yeah, that makes sense.
I'm kind of trying to hedge. Like, if this isn't right, I'm trying to find other places where I can kind of hedge and switch to if it doesn't work out. But
Yep, yep,
I
yep.
understand the limitation of that, where if I'm constantly hedging, I'm not actually kind of building and going far enough into something where it's likely to kind of bear fruit on its own.
Um, yeah. Okay. The final thing I kind of want to say is just a quick summary. It's something like, Logan, you are an overperformer who likes strategy and consistently learns things on the job in order to make the systems that you're part of better. But at the moment, you're blocked in your career because you have no clear pathway to utilize those skills and no environment which appreciates those skills or in which those skills can manifest themselves and mature. Um, of course, the solution to that is find an environment where you can practice the skills and they are appreciated. Um, w- which environment? Obviously, this is the hard part, and it sounds like you're also struggling with that part a little bit. I'd say one thing just to note is any environment is better than being alone at all. Like any social or cultural environment that appreciates your skill set, it could be a literal Chipotle. Like any environment is better than being
Yeah,
alone.
my
Um,
favorite job was actually a cafeteria. Like, it was a really good
right. Yeah, there's
environment.
a bunch of
It's lots of
ops
fun.
to do. There's like a lot of strategy. It's like any place where people are trying to achieve a goal will be a place where you will feel valued and like where your skills will be able to be developed. That doesn't necessarily mean go pick the first place necessarily that you think of. Like it doesn't mean go to Chipotle or whatever and become a manager. But um, on the other hand, it's like I wouldn't personally. worry as much if the default is like just trying a bunch of things alone in kind of like a in kind of just like an indie tinkery fashion, because I feel like that can create a loop that lasts quite a long time of like, oh, tinkering but never actually making enough substantial progress on things. At that point, I feel like you might as well just be working on a team that you enjoy, doing like
Yeah,
literally
that makes
anything
sense.
enjoyable.
And I think that's where I've been
Because
trending. And I'm oh, sorry.
yeah, no, I just mean generally my impression is something like your skills will shine in an environment where people need them,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course.
And I think, and that's where kind of where I'm at. Where like finishing my program, I'm saying, hey, like I should probably just start looking for jobs that fit what I'm trying to do, that are relatively kind of maybe not super high paying right out of college, but find something that's good and kind of be either being in San Francisco where there's like this like the tech hub, or New York where it's kind of a culture hub, or Austin where there's the government is doing a lot of really cool new things, or kind of finding one place that has a certain type of scene that will kind of benefit. That is where I can kind of, yeah, I can
Yeah,
kind of look for jobs in all of them and then kind of see where one lands and whether it feels right, and kind of find the tribe there.
and yeah, and of course there are a lot of options available to you amongst those choices, like you're mentioning. And again, it's like just don't get too distracted between all the options. Try your best to journal about it. Do you journal?
I don't journal. I don't do have a journaling practice,
Yeah.
but a lot of I try to I tweet like I treat Twitter and every other places like GPT and kind of a lot of places as a journal where I'm kind of expressing thoughts and expressing questions and expressing kind of
Do people
sometimes I'll write
respond
more,
to you
sometimes
on
less.
Twitter very much?
Not all the time, but
Yeah.
usually I'll like respond to something that someone said, and then I'll write something on that I was thinking,
I'd
and so
say to
I'll get more response there, but less on my original post.
Yeah, because I wasn't able to like I feel like I spent so much of this call getting context. I feel like I wasn't able to get too much into okay, what comes next. But two things that definitely will help is a proper journal. So like just to yourself, not to anyone else, not socially, not on the internet. The reason for this is because when you're journaling, it's not like an activity like Twitter. It's a different thing. It's like you're talking with yourself. You're just talking to yourself. But the problem is if you talk to yourself out loud, you get into loops. And if you talk to yourself on paper, you'll notice that you almost want to get in the loop and you're like, oh wait, I just talked about that. Like I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna talk about something else. You're gonna get through a lot very quickly and you'll get to a lot more clarity that way. And then the second thing is conversations like this one, where you have somebody who could be a coach or could operate in the role of a coach, who ideally you pick people who are as successful and stable and have as good epistemics as you can, who are also like brutally strategic almost. Um, I think more conversations like that. The reason I'm mentioning this in particular for you, like, oh, wouldn't anyone benefit from this? It's just like my feeling is you're considering a lot of options right now and you're just not sure. And like I'm saying, my impression is there isn't necessarily one correct option. I think you need another 5 or 10 hours of working through all of these options, like really playing out every single scenario. And it's work. It's work the same way that writing a novel is work or writing a screenplay is work or whatever. It's
Yeah.
like you need to write
Hmm.
out all your life stories that could happen
Yeah.
based on where you're at right now,
Yeah.
or talk them out with a coach. And you need to be
Yeah.
non-delusional, so they can't be life stories that are fake or impossible. And it can't be about what's going to be a big idea and what's going to get you $1 billion, because like that's not going to happen. And like if those things happen, those are like lucky, amazing. Like that's cool. But what you want to do is like work out every different scenario and be like, oh, actually, I realize I was kind of fixated on these three scenarios, but here's actually 20 more scenarios that all feel good to me. And now that I've stopped fixating, I feel like I have all these possibilities, and maybe it'll be much easier for me to choose. Um, and laying out all those pathways in front of yourself, I think, would be really, really, really helpful.
Yeah. That's
And
great.
and I actually just think it's going to take hours, like many hours of
Yeah.
discussion.
It's funny you mentioned doing it at kind of approaching it like a novel, because I kind of, for the project that I'm doing research on, I kind of have developed this framework that is kind of like a novel telling a story, how different things relate to each other, how things do kind of how things do on their own. And a lot of the nodes in that are kind of like characters in the story of my life in different ways. And I'm kind of separating them out, understanding them kind of separately as their own directions and getting kind of clarity on those. And so I think that's it feels helpful so far. And I think the more I put into that and the more writing that out and kind of getting that
Yeah.
really
Especially
concretely
social will
laid
help a
out.
lot. Like try to have more conversations. I think it'll help a lot. And then do that with conversations with yourself as well with journaling. Okay, cool, dude. Sorry that I couldn't be more immediately
Oh,
tactically
no, no,
helpful, but
no, it's okay.
on the other hand, hopefully this was helpful in some ways. And
Yeah, of course.
I look forward to seeing you around on the timeline.
No, this was very helpful. Thank you for the clarity and the direction. I think there's a lot of seeds of thought that are going to grow into good directions.
Perfect. All right, later, dude. Bye.
Thanks. Take care.